G'day everyone and welcome to my art channel Brushes with Beck. Today's video is once again a continuation of the piece I have been working on for the last couple of months now, I suppose. This is a drawing of a red kangaroo. Now, if you haven't been following along with those videos, I am working on a piece of PASTELMAT board in the dark grey colour, and I am using both faber-castell Polychromos and Derwent Drawing pencils to complete this piece. Now, as you can see, I've got quite a bit of work done on the upper body and the side of the face of this kangaroo already, and if you are interested in seeing those processes, please check out the previous videos I have of this drawing, which I will link. I will link number one up in the cards, and I'll link all of those videos down in the description box below, so check those out if you are interested. So today's process is very much the same as with previous videos, although today I am also drawing in the eye, which you can see I have just started there. So I've started by mapping in the different, I suppose, color zones of the eye, mapping in those highlights nice and early and getting them in nice and strong, and then gently shading areas to indicate where there's gradients of light to dark, mapping in the pupil and the iris, and that iris is dark brown leading into the black of the pupil there, and just making that a nice smooth rich color before working around the edge of the eye and mapping in all that detail. Now, all those little details around the eye are very, very fine, and I had to sharpen my pencils to the very finest points so I could get those in accurately. And that's extremely crucial when you're working with tiny detail like this, is to make sure that you do have a very fine point on your pencil so you can get those lines accurate. And in situations like this, it's probably beneficial to have some sort of magnifier so you can more easily see what you're drawing. I find when it gets to really fine details, it can be quite tricky to accurately place your pencil on the page exactly where you want. And those dark marks that you see over the highlight in the eye is actually the reflection of the kangaroo's eyelashes in the eye itself. So with the eye, the main eye and the eyelids finished, apart from the lashes, I go back to working on the fur. So the eye was actually very, very quick on this piece, much less work than some other eyes, but the basic colors and shapes are there to still make it look very realistic and very glassy. And that's the important aspect of this, not so much how much detail is in that eye, but how well that eye is represented and made to look realistic and rounded. So back onto the fur, and the same process as with the rest of the fur as I've done is working in those underlayers of color, using various color pencils to build up those underlayers, blending them out with a cotton bud before adding the fine detail of the fur in over the top. And I really am using a wide variety of colors, different browns, peachy and yellow tones, pink tones, the assortment of warm greys, a couple of cool greys, and very occasionally black as well. So with PASTELMAT, these underlayers, I can go on very, very messy. I'm not applying a lot of pressure when I put in these underlayers. I'm just basically scribbling a little bit over the page, applying a bit of color, and then blending them out with the cotton bud to smooth them out. And they don't need to be absolutely perfectly smooth because I'm going over all the top of those layers with fur detail, which will hide any imperfections in those underlayers. And sometimes those imperfections can actually improve upon some of the depth in the fur detail. So it's a very slow process, as you've seen from previous videos, and by the fact that I'm still not finished this piece, I'm afraid, but I am definitely getting there. It's just really tricky to find time some days to actually work on it, and I don't like to start working on a drawing, like I don't like to continue working on it if I know I don't have a good block of time to dedicate to it, because it can be tricky I find I have to refocus myself and work on it for a long time, and so I get sort of in a zone working on it as opposed to stopping and starting, which can make it I find if I stop and start a lot and only work in short segments of time, sometimes a drawing can get a little bit disjointed because I'm not focusing properly on what I'm supposed to be doing. So it's very important to make sure you're continuing with the drawing as you were before as much as possible to keep it looking the same. So I keep all of my colors aside while I'm working on a piece, and if I'm not keeping them aside because I'm working on something else in the meantime, I have a list of colors for the piece, and so I can easily pull them back out again and continue using them when I return to doing that piece. So that makes it much easier to continue working, having my pencils just ready to go, and then I know I'm using the right colors rather than using different colors that might make the piece look a little bit disconnected, disjointed from one section to another. Now, as you can see, as I'm adding in these fine white hairs around the edge of the muzzle there, it's actually making my darks at the bottom of the jaw look much darker. And that's really, really important. If you find that your darks or your highlights aren't quite popping, if you think you've got your brights bright enough but they're not quite popping, sometimes you just need to darken your darks, or vice versa. It may not necessarily be that you need to make your darks darker, but your lights might need to be lighter. I hope that didn't come out too confusing. So before continuing on, I just want to say thank you very much for watching. If you are enjoying the video, please give it a thumbs up, comment down below, and subscribe to my channel for a new video every single week. So moving through the fur, you can see I'm adding in lots of little fur details in an area before I finish an area and move on to the next segment where I do the layering up underneath. Now, with the area around the eye in particular, there is a lot of very fine short hair and a lot of changing direction, so it's very important to pay really close attention to those changes in direction of the fur. And because of that changing fur direction, sometimes the fur is pointing directly at you, in which case it simply looks like a little dot or a tiny little dash. So it's very, very important to pay very close attention to that. And a lot of my detail in this area took me so long because it was the tiniest little dashes and dots of fur in this area. But it was important to take the time to do that correctly, because otherwise it looks wrong, the fur looks too long. So that's why this piece has been so time consuming, especially around the face, because the fur strands get shorter, there's a lot more to detail and a lot more to work around, because I don't place fur strands wherever I feel like. I tend to lay in perhaps the darker strands first, and then I work around those with my lighter strands, and I'm not necessarily layering wherever over the top. I work in between previous fur strokes that I have laid down. So when I'm doing that, I'm not using a lot of pressure. You don't need a lot of pressure on PASTELMAT to get a good application of color, which is one thing I love about it. It makes it really easy on the hand if you get problems with your hand. So when I'm laying in fur strokes, just a sharp edge or corner of a pencil or a sharp point, and then, medium light pressure for that fur stroke is plentiful. If you want to get a really solid dark fur stroke, then by all means apply a bit more pressure, and I do that sometimes with the brights as well. If I want to get a really bright fur strand in, I might apply a bit more pressure, make a bit of hard pressure, but overall medium pressure for fur strokes on PASTELMAT is absolutely sufficient. So as you can see, I'm not quite finished in that area above the eye, but sometimes I need to work in more underlayers in an area before I can continue detailing in fur, because of the ways that fur overlaps into different areas. So along this ridge of the front of the face here, I'm having to add in base colors along the opposite side of that ridge so that I can overlap the fur across the top of that ridge. So, like I said, very, very slow process for all these fine little fur strokes, but it will all come together in the end and make it really, really worthwhile. So all the colours that I am using, like I said, I've been using all throughout the piece. I've used the same beige, red and cinnamon and dark browns all throughout the piece so that all the colours are really unified and the whole piece works together as one. The important part is making sure my dark areas are dark enough and my light fur strands are light enough. So overall, so far I'm really pleased with how this piece is turning out. It has been way more work than I anticipated, but I'm working at a larger scale than I normally do, which is part of why it's taking me so long to detail and why there is so much work to do. But it's been really worthwhile because this piece looks really good in person, and I'm thrilled with it so far, and I cannot wait to actually see it finished. But the scale that it's at and the amount of detail in this fur and those fine fur strands is why it's taking me so long. But I'm finding it really rewarding because I am learning all the time. No matter what level of art you're at, I feel like we are always learning and progressing. Even if it seems like we're not, we are taking in information. We may not necessarily be able to act on that information, but sometimes we are, and then we see great improvements in our art in potentially a short space of time, versus when we're just absorbing information but it's not coming through in our art. So this piece has been fantastic for me because I feel like I've been able to learn a lot and also be able to act on that learning and see the change in my art in the piece in front of me as I'm working through it. So thank you once again for watching. I know this video or this art piece has gone on for way more videos than I originally anticipated it would, but I do hope you've enjoyed it anyway. So once again, thank you very much for watching. Please like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you again next week for another video. Stay creative.